I visited this pub car park, not for a pint, but to see a real-life archaeological dig. Welcome back to History on Your Doorstep, the series which introduces you to the extraordinary past hidden in the most ordinary of places. Last episode, we brought the triangular temple to life, exactly where it stood almost 2,000 years ago. But this episode, I want to know what modern archaeology looks like in St Albans. We've established that Verulamium Park is a scheduled monument, making digging on it without special permission extremely difficult. But the further you get from the centre of the Roman town, the rules begin to change. This wall here roughly marks the old city boundary, where the rules of the scheduled ancient monument begin. But on the other side of the wall, the rules are a little bit different. So a couple of weeks ago, I met up with Tom to discuss an exciting development just 500 metres from Verulamium Park. How did this dig come about then?
So this one is different than normal. Usually it's, in my realm, it's through research proposals. So somebody will be like, they have a research question and they study it and then they go, you know what, we need to excavate to understand something. But this has actually come through the planning process. And this is how 90% of archaeology in the UK is done, because it's inbuilt now into the planning process. So you've got a redevelopment site here and they have to get planning. They know that they're in an area that needs archaeological conditions. So they go through the planning process. They're told you have to do a minimum amount of archaeological investigation to do something. Because this is right on the edge of Verulamium, I knew this was coming about at some point, and so I've kept in touch with the planning archaeologists and said, when this comes, we want to be involved.
Lots of interesting discoveries have happened during digs that started due to planning. In Northamptonshire, during explorations for HS2, archaeologists found a wealthy Roman trading village, which dated back to a huge Iron Age settlement from around 400 BC. This site wouldn't have been found without archaeology being an essential part of the planning process. What are you hoping to get out of this with having the public involved?
It's all about engagement.
Yeah.
So that's our whole remit of the museum, is to get people understanding that, or interacting with their heritage and interacting with their cultural heritage around them all across the city, because it's prevalent. You can see it everywhere. Everything around us is a listed building.
Yeah.
But when they're in Verulamium Park, for example, there's an understanding that there's archaeology there, and maybe there's been some digs done in the past. But now it's because it's in the planning process. It's not necessarily big open sites where people can see all the time. It's on an industrial scale. It's done brilliantly, but it's done in a commercial way.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily for the public consumption. But they're often just in somebody's garden,
Yeah.
or behind the building, or behind a pub,
Yeah.
and behind a Hessian fence where
Yeah.
the construction's going on. So it's not seen.
Yeah.
It's not hidden.
Yeah.
It's just not open,
Yeah.
because it's just part of the planning process. This happens all the time, all across the country, and we get these little windows of information, and just people coming down and interacting with it and enjoying it.
So the obvious big question is, what have you found so far?
It's different in each track.
Exactly.
And that was the whole idea. Is this phase is evaluation. So you're evaluating what type of archaeology you might have and whether it's intact. It's really important whether it's intact or whether it's completely disturbed, because that will tell us whether it's got considered significant in terms of what information we can get from this, whether it needs to be preserved, etc., etc. So at the front here, we've got 3 trenches, and they've picked up different sequences, to be honest. So we've got our test pit 1, which is just over here, where we had a nice wall across a mostly modern wall, and with some concrete lipping up against it. But on the other side, it had actually been cut differently, and there was 2 different phases of somebody interacting with that.
Yeah.
Now, this isn't Roman archaeology.
Yeah.
This isn't, even medieval archaeology or anything like that, but it is archaeology. It's just recent times. So we removed that later phase after we completely recorded it. And then in this particular test pit 1, we then came down onto quite a large pit. We were quite excited to begin with because we were getting Roman sherds out of there. We're like, all right, we might have a lovely Roman context. But we've also got medieval pottery in there, and lots of different objects. So it's a later fill of a large pit. Now, with that pit, it's actually gone down to the limit of our excavation. We can only go down a metre. That's the safe level we can do it, and also that's lower than the impact of the building that's going to be on here. So we've stopped excavation there, but we've through our evaluation, we've shown there is complex archaeology in it. So that's done its job. It's not got down onto, you know, the lovely Roman stuff that we all want to see, but it's shown us that there is archaeology intact there. So that's quite interesting. Test pit 2 we opened up, and we've just come down onto the top level of our most modern stuff, and it's really hard, concrete stuff. We really need to machine it out in an ideal situation. So we've left it in situ at the moment. We're going to record because it's showing a sequence of archaeology that's still very quite modern, but intercutting. And then in test pit 3, which is in the background here, that's been really quite interesting. We came down onto a post-medieval brick floor, and it was lovely because the bricks are up against the wall there, and they're all different shapes and sizes, and they're all for different periods. They're completely reuse of all the material around us. So we'll date that by the latest brick. So there'll be a brick specialist who goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and goes, right, that's from this period. That is the date of your floor. But what we definitely know, obviously, is anything below that happened before that floor. So we take that away after we've completely recorded it, so it can then be mapped onto everything around us from that period. And then we just progress down through different layers. So we're now into this sort of substrat of very dark material that's full of lots of artifacts.
There's been remains of cut animal bones. There's been some small pieces of metalware, a lot of metal waste products, we think, from the blacksmith or something like that. A lot of iron slag. But we are thinking we're getting closer and closer to the Roman layer now. We have finally found a little piece of Roman Samian ware, so hopefully it will just keep getting more and more exciting.
But again, it's not conclusively from one period, so it's not that intact, you know, sort of archaeology I was talking about earlier, which is what we need to say this is a pristine context. This is not disturbed. It's mixed. So we're continuing down there. We're actually near the limit of our excavation as well. So we're near to our meter. At what point, again, we'll stop and we'll say, this is what we've got. This is just the facts of what we've seen. And then it'll go back to planning, and then they decide how to progress. Whereas at the back of the pub, it's completely different.
So I had these pits started a bit differently. If you could just give me a chat through that.
Yeah, so we're here around the back of the Rose and Crown pub, and the deposits we've been finding have been of a totally different character. At the front, they had structures and rubble. Here we came down onto about 1.5 foot of really mixed topsoil. It had loads of different artefacts, from modern plastic toys down to 17th century pottery associated with the pub, ale beakers and that kind of thing. After we got through that layer, we came down on kind of a irregular surface of cobbles. Going through that, we hit a really brilliant white chalk surface. It was really compact. There was a chance we thought it might be natural, but upon further investigation, that proved not to be the case.
Now that chalk layer, we were like, okay, we know the bedrock, you know, the actual bedrock around here is chalk based. So we were like, have we really hit bedrock at this point? In which case that would be the end of the archaeology in there. But you have to test that. So we cut straight through it because that is the process. And we found that this was redeposited natural. So what they've done, somebody's dug out something round, whether they've laid that down as a surface or not, or just dumped it, I'm not quite sure yet. But underneath there is still a continuing sequence of material.
We started to get a few little bits of Roman pottery coming out of that, but no identifiable features just as of yet. But we've still got a couple of days to get on with the job.
There's a lot going on.
It's so interesting how all the trenches can go on like different journeys in such a small space.
Yeah, I mean, if we do go to full excavation, that would be really interesting, because then we'd open this whole area and these would all become part of it, and then you understand them in a very different way.
So no, we haven't found a whole intact mosaic like the Wheelers, but the dig was a great example of how archaeology in St Albans is never over. Most of the time, archaeology is in fact a bit boring. You're unlikely to find that hidden temple or that unknown ritual object. But like Tom said, digs like these happen every day, and they offer amazing, almost micro-histories into small areas. And when they're run like this, open to the public, it's a great opportunity to introduce people to these smaller histories that would maybe go underappreciated otherwise. Next episode, we'll be using archaeological evidence found in similar digs from across Britain to explore the lives of 4 real historical women with ties to this town. And in the process, we'll find out more about the one woman who is the reason we know any of them existed.